Today, Senator Yaw and Representative Keller have brought us here, farmers, policymakers, students, and community members alike, to talk about the current state and future of agriculture. The life of an agriculturalist has never been easy, but if I have learned anything thus far, it is that the agricultural community will persevere. Today, my hope is that we can start a discussion about progress. So here's to the farmer who wakes with the sun to be a steward of the land. Here's to the congressmen who travel to Harrisburg and beyond to fight for the rights of their constituents. Here's to a bountiful harvest and a prosperous season, and to progress. Cheers.
It may seem odd that energy and food would be in the same room, but you know, food security and energy security are two very important things in my world, and we've come together and recognized that for most people in America and the world, having energy and having food are two pretty critical needs. It's been some, you know, we've had some tough sledding the last few years as it relates to agriculture. I wish our budget secretary understood agriculture as well as our DEP secretary some days, but we've had to really fight hard for things like our vet school and Penn State Extension and some things like that. And fortunately, we're able to prevail with the support of our Secretary of Agriculture and our Ag Department getting the word across, but really our legislators who made sure that it was well understood how important agriculture is to Pennsylvania and how important these entities like Penn State and our vet school are to the industry of agriculture. And it couldn't have happened without the hard work of you know, Senator Yaw, Representative Keller, and really I had the opportunity to send out some letters asking for some support, and realized that I had about 175 personal relationships with our legislature out of the 253 members, and it was bipartisan. It was Republicans, it was Democrats, and it you know, it was really reassuring to know that we have this kind of support from our legislature here in Pennsylvania. So on behalf of the 500 agribusiness members of Penn Ag, we're pleased to be here, and I know the folks from Sunoco and Seneca feel the same way. So thanks for letting us be here and sponsor this. Appreciate it.
Let us pray. Creator God, we come to you today and we give you great thanks for all the talented people that are here today. You blessed all these people with many wonderful vocations. The farmer is the backbone of society. And as we gather here today, we have many people who are serving you in many ways to love our neighbor. We have the farmers, we have the business people that are gathered here. We have all I don't even want to say politicians, because the ones we have are public servants. May we all work together, and we pray for everyone who's gathered here today. May you bless their talents to take them out into the world. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning, and thank you all again. On behalf of Senator Yaw, thank you for being here. As Representative Keller said earlier, excuse me, Senator Yaw is chairman of the Senate Environmental Resources and Energy Committee. So we work quite regularly with our next speaker, and we are very honored to have Secretary McDonald here with us for the second time. Secretary McDonald was with us in Bradford County at one of our other ag breakfasts up there. So we appreciate you coming back. We're glad we didn't scare you off. But just want to provide a little background on Secretary McDonald. Prior to being named the Secretary, Patrick served as DEP's Director of Policy. In addition, he ran the State Energy Office and was charged with coordination of renewable energy and energy efficiency issues. Secretary McDonald also served several years as Executive Policy Manager for former Commissioner Pamela A. Whitmer of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, focusing specifically on electric, natural gas, and water issues, as well as cybersecurity and the impact of environmental regulation on energy markets. Secretary McDonald began his career at DEP working in the State Energy Office on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and green building projects. Throughout his career, the Secretary has worked to achieve success in the nexus between energy and environmental issues. At its 25th anniversary fall meeting in 2018, the Environmental Council of the State's elected Secretary McDonald as its Secretary Treasurer. So congratulations on that election as well. So I'd like to recognize DEP Secretary Patrick McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you all, and a pleasure to be here with you all this morning. A couple things at the top. First, want to thank Representative Keller for inviting me here today, as well as Senator Yaw. As Nick said, we work pretty closely together between the department and the environmental committees, and it's been a wonderful, great relationship with Senator Yaw, and he truly is one of those guys who goes above and beyond. We're here today focused on agricultural issues. Honor to be here in front of you for today's breakfast. One of the things I like to do and like to point out at the outset of this, and we were actually just having exactly this discussion at the table, is the important thing for myself, for the representative, for the senator, for all of us in government, is to engage in conversation, right? There's a lot of things that are outcomes of decisions we all make. And the most important element of that is for us to be unafraid of being engaged in the conversation around that. So I'll point out right now, looking forward to that conversation once I'm done with some brief remarks here. Wanted to just give you an overview of some of the things we've been working on and some of the things we've been doing. First, an issue we've been working on pretty directly in my time in the Secretary's office over the last 2.5 years is Chesapeake Bay Initiative. And I try to say Chesapeake Bay at the beginning and then never say Chesapeake Bay at the end again during the conversation, because the reality is our initiative related to the Bay is about our local water quality. It is not about something that happens 90 miles south of Harrisburg. It's about how are we delivering great water resources to our own residents here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the partnership that we've had with Department of Ag, with farmers, with the Farm Bureau and others in this has been one of the key components that we've engaged in to try to set us up for success. And that's a very deliberate choice of words, because we certainly aren't there yet. We have until 2025 to reduce about 34 million pounds of nitrogen, for example, as well as phosphorus and sediment in order to meet our federal obligation under the pollution diet that the states collectively have. That's a big lift for all of us. So the challenge before us, and the reason why that relationship with Secretary Redding at Department of Ag and the relationship with the agricultural community is so important, is we're trying to chart a course and a path on this that is not about just that pollution reduction, but to borrow a phrase Secretary Redding likes to use related to this effort, that this isn't about how we achieve some pollution goal by 2025. This is about what does the future of farming look like for the next 50 years? You know, how do we give ourselves a platform that is supportive of the farm community and supportive of all of the things that we want to do for water quality as a Commonwealth? So in that regard, right now we're engaged in what we call our Watershed Implementation Plan Phase 3. I know it's a really evocative name that you'll all remember. Very exciting name that you'll all remember. The WIP, the Phase 3 WIP as we call it, is really focused on local involvement. So where we are right now is really coming at it from two ends. One, we've engaged in a lot of modeling and understanding what's happening across the watershed and what's happening within the Bay watershed, and then with a specific focus on counties. So right now we're working with 4 pilot counties across the southern part of the state to figure out what does a county plan look like that addresses pollution obligations within those counties, and not in a regulatory hammer kind of way, but in a what are the opportunities, how can we find funding, who are the right partners, how do we make decisions, how do we engage municipalities, farmers, residents within those counties in order to accomplish this. Because this is not a decision and not an approach that can ever be all 67 counties, all 43 counties within the Bay watershed. It is a county by county, municipality by municipality, parcel by parcel decision as to what are the best ways of approaching this, what are the best opportunities for approaching this. I always like to say this is not a challenge, it's an opportunity, and how do we address that? We've done some things at the department trying to be supportive of some of the things we need to do. We have, which I'll say bluntly, not the most popular thing, but one of the obligations we had from the federal government was to do more inspections at farms for nutrient management plans and manure management plans. On the back end of that, one of the things we did was pulled together some resources so we could reimburse farmers for those. So we did over 1,000 plans last year that the department reimbursed the development of manure management and nutrient management plans. We're continuing that program with about $900,000 in the current year. So we want to continue to try to be that support and not just have it all, as I say, be a strict regulatory approach. We're working right now, as I said, in some of those pilot counties on things like legacy sediment. This is sediment that deposited behind old mill dams that are no longer there. And every time we have a rain event, that sediment sloughs off into the streams and creates pollution in those streams. We're taking out some of that legacy sediment, and what does that do besides the pollution piece? It actually creates wetland area. We have in one case in Lancaster County, one of these wetland areas that after they did the wetland planning, they went back 6 months later and discovered an endangered plant species had come back that they hadn't put there. It just decided this was a good place to be. In other cases, it's reduced flooding. It gives, by taking out some of that legacy sediment, it gives the energy from the water someplace to go that isn't into people's homes, people's businesses. So that's on the one end, which is a good segue for what is very much on the mind of North Central region, and unfortunately has been on the mind of the North Central region for more than this year, but the last several years, and that is the flooding that we see in this area specifically. Marcus Cole is our North Central Regional Director. He's here today as well. And he and his staff, I know, have been very much engaged, probably with a lot of people in this room and a lot of people not in this room, to deal with those issues. And there's a lot of things I will point out about some of what we're doing about flooding. I do want to make very, very clear the one thing, and it's something Marcus and I have talked about as well as I've talked to several legislators about. And I think it's that misconception where nuance gets lost, right? That I'll use the D word, dredging, right, is either looked at as a good thing or a bad thing. And the conversation we're now having is it's part of the solution. There are places where it makes sense, but we need to understand, but it's one element of what we do. There is, what we don't want, for example, is to remove a lot of sediment and things from a stream that end up increasing the energy in that stream, end up eroding more stream banks and creating a larger problem. And you're having the exact same conversation in that stream segment a year later, 2 years later, as well as having conversations now about things happening downstream of where that work was done. That's not to say it's not part of the solution. There are areas where that is absolutely the thing you need to do. There are other cases where the thing you need to do is very specific to that stream section, and it might be some armoring, riprap, issues like that in a particular case. And then there's a lot of cases where we need to have a better understanding of what is happening in the stream. One of the questions I know our staff always asks, and I ask, is if sediment is depositing here and that's the concern, why is it depositing there? We've had a great program for a number of years now in the north central region that we're trying to scale up, and work that's gone on not far from here that I've been to in Sunbury, for example, where in collaboration with Fish and Boat Commission and the North Central Conservancy, we're working together to put in deflectors, to put in places, to make the stream function as a stream so the sediment doesn't stop there, right? It brings the stream back into a more, I'll say, natural kind of alignment so that the water has places to go, the energy has places to dissipate, and it has places to go that isn't having these horrific impacts on communities in the north central region and across the state. We need to figure out how we do more of that, and that's some of what we're scaling up, which goes right back to the Chesapeake Bay Initiative, right? This is all stuff that helps us on the flooding end, helps us on wetlands, helps us on pollution reduction. And that's why conversation around all of this is so important. Last thing I'll mention in terms of substance very quickly is we're also doing a lot of work on the municipality side. We have new stormwater permit requirements, again, a federal government requirement that in some communities where they have these urbanized areas, they have to do a plan. They've had a permit for a number of years. It's been primarily qualitative, that they needed to have certain programs in place. This, between 2018 and 2023, this is the first time that they're required to have plans that demonstrate a 10% reduction in sediment over that 5-year period. That's the top level piece. What we're trying to do on the back end of that is be supportive of ways for those municipalities to achieve that goal in as cost-effective a manner as possible. So, for example, not far from here, Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority, they're not doing that municipality by municipality. They're doing that across the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority. All of those municipalities are working together. So if they're going to put in BMPs, they'll put them in best management practices. They'll put them in where it makes the most sense, where it's most cost effective for the collective of municipalities, as opposed to overpaying municipality by municipality. Doing the same thing in York. There's 3 municipalities in Dauphin County that are working together, and we're trying to be encouraging of more of that. We're also looking at ways we can actually move some of this outside of urbanized areas, onto farms, for example. That farms may be partners that can work with municipalities to give cost-effective approaches to solving some of these stormwater problems within the municipality. Again, it's pollution reduction. It's how do we coordinate? How do we collectively resolve these issues? Again, the importance of that and the hard work of that. The easiest thing for anybody to do is say, thou shalt. The hardest part is getting and keeping people in a room to work together and figure out the hard questions around this, around how do we deal with this. Very appreciative of the conversation. And the last thing I always like to point out to lighten things up, and if any of you were with me in Bradford County, you would have heard a version of this, so apologies. But one of the things I do like to point out when I'm in a group is I do, in my very limited spare time, I do improv. I do comedy improv in Harrisburg. And the reason I like pointing that out is because it is incredibly helpful in the job, because most people think improv is like you're making stuff up and all of that, and there's maybe elements of that. But the reality of what we do on the stage is you get on the stage, you get a suggestion from your audience, one word, and it inspires somebody on that stage to say something. And when you're not that person, your only job in that moment becomes to listen to that person and respond honestly. And when you respond, the other person's job becomes to listen to that and respond honestly. And I always say, over the course of 3 or 4 minutes, we create something that neither of us would have imagined is the thing we were going to create when we walked onto that stage. And I like to say, that is my job. I walk into this room, rooms in Harrisburg, rooms across the state, with perspective, experience, ideas, but I do not have a monopoly on that. I need to be open to other people's perspective, experience, ideas, and figure out collectively how we solve the problem as opposed to focus on a position. So excited to continue engaging with Representative Keller, Senator Yaw, the legislature, as well as all of the businesses, organizations, residents of the Commonwealth.
Tell me why you brought your kids here today.
We try to give the kids a broad focus of what agriculture is all about. There is the political part of it, there's the hard work part of it, and there's everything in between. So we try to give them a little bit of everything, and I think this is our officer crew. They come down and they enjoy the speakers and the general knowledge we get from today's with Gene and Representative Keller.
What is some of your takeaway of what you heard today that are some of the concerns?
Well, obviously it's a frustration. People in the ag community think that, we're getting bashed for things, and then they look around and say, people in lawn care are putting fertilizer on, it's going right in the storm sewer. We're putting fertilizer, 50 acres in the back 40, and we're getting blamed for some of the things. So that's one of the things, the inability to work together, the communication we're having a problem with, where we're getting hammered and we're trying to do the best thing we can, but we're getting fined and it becomes expensive, and there's a lot of frustration out there. So we need to get a better communication line between government and the regular people, the regular farmers, so to speak, and hopefully we get that settled.
So what is your hope for the future?
Well, my hope is that we can work together. I know some of the regulations are put there because there's an offender. We're not all offenders. We need to make sure that we can all work together and do as little as possible rule-wise, but as much as possible that covers the things that we need to cover. So when we start looking at some of the things, and I try to tell the kids, you have to be educated about everything that you're doing. And in this case, we hope people would get educated and not make rules that affect one bad thing, but affect, the 99 people that are doing great things.
We have a bunch of our newer officers here in their white button-downs. It's really nice for them to come. FFA is, a lot of kids think it's the agriculture, but we do a lot of more in-depth things that nobody really realizes as much.
Like what?
Like coming to political events like this. We've gone to one of the Secretary of Agriculture meetings, and we do quite a few things like that most people don't really see.
So do you think this is a good idea to have this annual meeting that Senator Yaw does?
Oh, we enjoy it. Sometimes the stuff that comes in is really educational. We really enjoy the different points of view, things that we didn't know about. And to bring in speakers that are, the dean of college and the dean of this, or these heads of state that kind of give us a broader view of what's going on. And again, I try to tell the kids, there's so much involved in all this. You have to, get involved. You have to stay involved, and you have to be educated.